you think good parenting is?
Well, I think good parenting is about following the principles of parenting, and they're incredibly simple, and everybody knows them. So it's love, guidance, providing discipline, education, and really they're about the basics.
Okay.
However, can I add that a lot of us don't actually know how to apply this. So parenting isn't always intuitive. I think we think it is, but we don't always know. So I think in order to be good parents, we probably need to know about what developmental stage our children are at. When we know that, then we know how to work with the child appropriately at whatever age. So maybe I could give you an example.
Please do.
Okay, so for example, 0 to 5, right? The guiding principle for 0 to 5 is love and play, right? Love the child, play with them. So when they're doing something wrong, distract them. There really is no point in applying discipline to a child underneath the age of 5.
So smacking a child or taking toys away from a child has no meaning.
Impact.
Really?
They don't have the capacity for learning discipline.
Okay.
That happens at a later stage. So all you do is distract the child at that stage. And I think the other main thing is not to get upset. So if parents themselves remain calm, and I know it's hard work, if you stay calm and you don't get, upset that the child is, throwing a tantrum on a floor in a supermarket,
Sure.
then, everything will be fine. You will actually calm down, you will learn how to cope with the child, but there's no point in slapping them.
Why not?
Because it doesn't work.
But surely a few slaps to a child's legs every so often is good for the child. Isn't that what we were told?
Yes, that's what we were told, and we're carrying the brunt of that now.
No, I've actually had people say to me, but it hasn't affected me in the least, being beaten by my father.
Yeah.
What do you say to people when they say that to you?
I think probably what they mean is that it was normal at the time,
Okay.
and everybody was having that experience.
Okay.
But it's absolutely not normal now, and it's not okay. The child will know that nobody else, it's not happening to any other child. They'll see it as wrong, and particularly, I think these days, a parent only does that when they've lost it. They've lost the cool, they slap the child, and that is very frightening for a child. So I think, if you do want to tap a child and you're completely calm and it's to get their attention, fine.
So tapping a child to get their attention, to maybe distract them in the course of tapping them from, like, say they're touching a fire, little tap, as opposed to proper smacking, which is what we would experience maybe as children.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. Okay. And but that's fine, but the difference is the control the parent has. Is the parent in control, or are they out of control?
Sure. I suppose a lot of people watching this, will be very conscious that they've watched lots of parenting programs on television, some very popular parenting programs on television, where nannies go into people's homes and stay with them for a week, and they tell the family how they should be doing things differently. What do you say to people who use some of the methods that are used by those nannies on television?
Well, I suppose I think you have to use your intelligence and you have to use your knowledge of the child. So there is no one way of parenting. I think we have guidelines for parenting, but each child will need different things from the parent. So for example...
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So one child will need loads of boundaries.
Right.
They'll wander off and they'll talk to anybody, and they'll wander off, and so you'll have to keep an eye on them, and maybe even attach a string at times.
Sure.
Another child will need the opposite. They'll need pushing out into the world and encouraging them to go out and play.
Yeah, sure.
So while there are guidelines, each child needs something different from the parent, and I think we know this automatically. So one child you'll discipline by putting them on the bold step, and another child, just a simple word will be enough for them to go, ooh.
Okay. Now, the naughty step. If I have a child who's 4 years of age, does the naughty step work?
I'm afraid I don't think so. I think they're too young for that.
Okay.
I think, preschool age, it doesn't really work. I think what works at that age is something very simple, like give loads of attention to positive behaviour, and try to ignore the stuff that's not working well.
Okay.
So distract them, and when they're behaving well, instead of going, oh, thank God, I've got 5 minutes, what you do is you give them loads of attention when they're being, really good.
Really good, okay.
And you try not to give too much attention when they're not being good.
So you almost ignore the fact that they're misbehaving and kind of encourage them when they are behaving.
Almost. Now, I know that's saintly stuff.
Sure.
I do realise that. But I still think that is the best, I suppose, guides that we could give to parents about how to get the best out of your child.
But if your child is misbehaving, right, say they're in a supermarket throwing a temper tantrum, and you're kind of ignoring the behaviour, they're probably going to escalate until such time as you crack, and then give in, and then you give them the attention, which might be the best thing for them, but they're going to realise what your breaking point is. Would it not have been better to just give them the attention to start off with and say, no, give them the discipline very quickly?
I mean, there probably is a case for that.
Okay.
However, I think, again, you may have to do something, but the parent must remain calm.
Right.
The
okay.
difference is, and
Okay.
we all know the difference, we've seen a parent in a supermarket slap a child,
Sure.
and everybody stops because you know that the parent has lost it, and this is
Sure.
the tip of the iceberg. Whereas you also know when a parent very firmly gets the child, sits them down and says, this behaviour is going to stop now. You know the difference.
So why do you think parenting has become so difficult? Because it seems like we were all parented much more kind of effectively, probably as children ourselves. So why is it now so hard?
Well, a couple of things are different. One
Okay.
is that as parents we don't have the time.
Okay.
Usually two parents are working under severe stress, financially and otherwise, and so we feel guilty that we don't have enough time with our children.
Okay.
And often our children are spending lots of time in creches and schools, and so we feel guilty, and we try to overcompensate for that. However, the facts are that the parents will always be the most important people in the child's life. You still will be and have the biggest influence. So the question is, what kind of influence do you want to have?
Good question. And what would you say?
Well, I'd like to be light-hearted, fun, enjoyable. I'd like to be able to play. I'd like to be firm about things that need to stand firm on. But I think, I don't always achieve that. And sometimes I'm just too exhausted and I give in. Now, that's fine.
Sure.
But not all the time. I think we have to make sure that we're demonstrating the kind of parent we want to be.
Do you think parents today are turning off their natural intuition when it comes to how they know they should parent their children when it comes to discipline? But because of society, because we have maybe a different approach to children now than we had 20 years ago, people are giving in to children in ways they shouldn't. Like, I was talking to somebody before about how she runs her children to school in the morning, even though they could very easily cycle, but because they're telling her, look, Ma, in fairness, Mom, all my friends get driven to school, and she knows it's wrong for them.
Yeah, no, that is wrong.
Yeah.
Now, and the reason that we do this, the reason that we give in is that it's the easier route.
Okay.
It's hard to to teach people self-discipline. It is difficult. So, for example, telling your son to take out the bins, you might have to tell him 6 times.
Okay.
You might have to stand between him and the computer. That's hard work. You could have it out yourself in 3 minutes, but it's still the right thing to do. And we know from evidence that giving children responsibility for household tasks mean that they are happy and more successful later on in life. It's important.
Explain that to me. So, in other words, instead of pampering our children and doing everything for them, if we actually encourage them to be responsible at an appropriate age, they're more successful in life?
Absolutely. All the evidence is saying this, and it's also saying that that's quite young. So giving children as young as 3 some little responsibility in the house.
Are you serious?
The
3 years of age?
evidence is that they are going to be happier, more responsible adults later on in life.
So if I have a 3-year-old and I get him to do my ironing, he'll be happy.
No, but you might
So maybe
get them
cleaning
a
up the-
little stool and stand at, they love bubbles, get them to do a little
Bubbles.
washing.
Or even
Yeah.
getting a brush, and maybe a little children's brush and
Yeah.
cleaning up the floor and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
They don't treat housework like we do. They
No.
think it's all play. We're just too old for that.
So maybe we should have a team of children cleaning our houses for us.
Yeah, it would be great.
I don't think it's allowed. It's kind of illegal. And when it comes to, I suppose, how children change from 2 years of age to 6 years of age to 10 years of age into teenagers, what do you notice most? What should parents be aware of?
Well, we need to be very clear about the developmental stage the child is at. So at the age
Okay.
of 2, we're potty training, and
Sure.
the child is learning to take some control of themselves. And again, there's no right age. So we need to work with where the child is at. And often parents become very worried, will they be toilet trained by the time they go to Montessori?
Sure.
Don't worry. The children aren't concerned about it, and the chances are they'll manage it fine. But they're also becoming quite willful at that age. They want to establish, a separate life. They have tantrums, and that's all normal. And again, the task of parenting is not to freak out. Stay calm, mind yourself, and play with the child. Now, the stage later on when they go to school, 4 to 5, 6, they're like sponges. They're absorbing, loads of information. They're asking loads of questions. They're very curious about things. However, they can't always express emotion. So very often a child will be feeling something but can't quite express what they're feeling.
Do you think parents identify or are able to recognise in their children often enough that the child's behaviour, while the parent mightn't like it, is actually a response to the child feeling something that they're not able to manage?
I think parents don't recognise that. And I
Okay.
think partly they don't recognise it because they don't want their children to suffer. So they don't see what they don't want to see.
Okay.
But for example, a tantrum, anger, some kind of slamming doors can often be a sign of underlying upset or trauma that a child is undergoing. But they don't have the ability to express it.
Okay.
They
So
don't have the words. So a parent might need to listen. Listen carefully and listen a lot to find out where the child is at.
But when children are constantly kind of almost at their parents, there's constant chattering at your parents, how do parents tune into certain conversations and then ignore this? The constant, "Ma'am, why is this? Why is that? Where are we going?" So how do you recognise when to tune into the important stuff? How do you recognise if your child is having feelings?
Look, all I can say is we need to listen.
Okay.
One of the reasons why kids chatter and chatter and chatter and tell you the same story 5 times is that you haven't heard it the first time.
So if you'd really listened the first time, they wouldn't tell you the second
No,
time?
they definitely wouldn't.
Okay.
So
Okay.
even reading your child a story and you're reading the words, but actually you're going, "I've got 5 minutes and I've got to get out the door."
Sure.
They'll say, "Read it again." Right? So just give them the attention that you can. And when you can't, that's fine. But you will hear it. You will know because you'll pick it up from your child. You'll hear it in the sound.
Yes.
And you'll know when they need a bit more attention.
Can you give a child too much attention?
Now, in a bad way, yes.
In what way? What way
Yeah,
is a bad
that
way?
it's overindulgent. It is over-involved in the child's life. It is not giving them any space to explore the world on their own. So,
Okay.
in that sense, yes. But I think if you're giving good quality attention, your judgment is good, and you know that it's time your child walked to school on their own. You'll know it's time that your child had free time to play with their friends without your interference. So I think a lot of the time what we're doing is we're actually afraid.
Sure.
We're afraid of the loss we experience when we're not needed as much.
Okay.
Yeah, so we overindulge
So
that.
we make them dependent on us,
Yeah.
so we feel needed by our children.
True.
Okay. And all these talent shows that are on at the moment where children who are now teenagers who actually can't sing have been told by their parents that they're amazing singers.
Yes.
What do you think about that? Isn't it great that parents are telling their children how wonderful they are, even if the rest of the world thinks, "No, you actually can't sing"? Is that a good thing?
No, it's a very bad thing, and it makes good television because we're all at home groaning.
Sure.
No, we need honesty. We need honesty and authenticity, and children will trust us if we speak the truth.
Okay.
So if your child, can't sing well, it is important that they're not exposed like that. But also, they're never going to trust us if we're always buttering up their egos and not telling them the truth. So if they look bad in something,
Yeah.
and they ask you how they look, you should tell them the truth. And
They can cope with it, can they?
children always cope with the truth.
Okay.
So for example, if I ask a 6-year-old child, "What is your mummy most worried about?" That 6-year-old child will be able to say, "She's worried about my older brother's drug habit."
Sure.
They know, they can handle it. And usually when we speak the truth, that's the end of it. There's no more talking because you have it.
And what do you think then of parents who allow their children to become overly sexualized and, wearing, say,
Yeah.
t-shirts with logos of particular magazines or watching, say, music videos that are quite sexualized at an early age? I mean, does that affect our children?
Yes, it does.
How?
And I think we all know that it affects them. So they become over-sexualized, they don't realize it, and what's happening is that they don't have the emotional or intellectual capacity to deal with the response they're getting. So it might be very well in the safety of your own house for a child to be wearing, a padded bra at 7.
Sure.
But if they walk outside the door, if they put themselves up on Facebook, the response to that can be quite frightening for the child
they can't
and
cope with
very
that.
inadequate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of the examples where parents do need guidelines. They might not know. They might not have the knowledge or the ability themselves. And therefore I do think we do need good guidelines for parenting so that age-appropriate stuff is happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Trish, is there any final words of advice that you'd like to give to the parents watching this particular program?
Well, I suppose one of the things I do think parents need to watch out for is the internet and what their kids are watching. And I think parents could be quite shocked at what the children access at a young age.
Okay.
And the advice I would give to parents about that particular topic is that parents should talk.
Okay.
Not at children, to each other in the presence of their children about appropriate sexual stuff,
Sure.
about appropriate internet stuff, so that the children, if they need to, know that their parents are able to talk about it and can say, that thing you were talking about, can I ask you about that? So that's a really important thing.
Okay.
So, usually parents whisper this stuff. But actually talking about it in an age-appropriate way allows the children to ask questions.
So making space for the children to bring their concerns or their intrigue about certain things that they've seen on the internet. Do you think children should be allowed to be on the internet by themselves? When I say a child, I mean somebody 12, 13, 14.
I think it's very hard not to allow that.
Okay.
I think, if you're not going to allow it, they'll probably be in somebody else's house.
Okay.
So what I would suggest is that the internet is in your kitchen or in your living room where there's a public area.
Okay.
I also think that you should be talking about those topics so that they can ask you. So parents need to be informed.
Okay.
You have soccer websites and little icons will come up. A kid can click into something that's quite shocking for them.
Yes.
And, it can all happen in seconds.
Yeah.
So I think we need to get over our whispering and be more willing to talk, not at them, so that they can pick up what they need to ask.
And one last question. This time it definitely is the last question. Fathers. Are fathers important in the development of their children's lives?
Enormously. And the good thing is that we have very good research on this. So particularly in the early years of a child's life, the father can often feel left out, unwanted, and really not that important.
Sure.
Because the mother-child bond is so strong. But the evidence is that when a father is involved very early in a child's life, that child grows up to be a confident, assertive human being. Less involvement in illegal activity, less involvement in drugs, and the chances of them staying at school goes up enormously. So the message to fathers is, you are so important.
Okay.
The idea that you can drop back in at 21 and say congratulations is really not the case. Really important. But I suppose they can have difficulty because that mother-child bond can be so strong.
Can women take over sometimes and exclude men, push men out of the equation?
Oh yes,
Really?
Oh yes, great capacity for doing that.
Okay.
And I suppose for a woman it can be so important.
Sure.
But men need to be invited in and asked in, and women need to let go of being right about everything, and they need to let men make the mistakes and do it their way, as opposed to doing it what women will often call the correct way.
The correct way. There's a right way and a wrong way, and then there's the woman's way of doing things. Trish, thank you so much for your time.
Very welcome.
Thank you.